Hello fellow aviators and welcome back to the channel. We discuss all things aviation. Angelo Dube here, welcoming you back. Today we're discussing the cost of a private pilot license, PPL. One of our followers reached out and said, listen, can you discuss the amount of money that goes into number one, the PPL, and then secondly the CPL. So in this episode we're focusing on the first license, the PPL. You will recall that we said the PPL requires a minimum of 45 hours. Now 15 of those must be solo hours, which means the student pilot must be flying as pilot in command of the aircraft, flying on their own solo. So 15 of those hours would be solo hours, and those are charged differently from the hours where it's a dual flight training hour, where the student sits in the cockpit together with an instructor. Those will usually have a higher charge because you're being instructed as you fly. But when you fly solo, the cost of hiring the aircraft to fly that particular hour is a little bit less because you are the pilot in command. You are the one commandeering the aircraft, telling it what to do, and you're in charge of planning your exercises and planning your route and everything. The figures we are quoting in this episode will vary from school to school. It will depend largely on what aircraft they have on offer and what their pricing structure is like. Most schools will have the Piper 140 or the Cessna 172, and others will throw in as a Charlie 150 or Charlie 152. So the costs that I'm breaking down here relate to any of those aircrafts. There might be minor differences here and there depending on each school and what aircraft they offer, but you can use these as working figures actually to have an idea of how much it would cost you to get your first license. So the law requires you to clock in at least 45 hours of training before you can test for your PPL license. Now I've already said these must be both dual and solo hours. Most schools will design your training to ensure that 30 of those hours are dual hours, where you fly with an instructor to do particular exercises, and then 15 of them are actually your solo hours where you commandeer the aircraft on your own as pilot in command. Now those 30 dual hours will be priced roughly at 2150, let's say 2150 per hour. So multiplied by 30 hours, that sits you at roughly 64,500 for the 30 dual hours, and the 15 solo hours will be priced at roughly 1950. That's 1,950 rands, and for 15 hours that sets you at about 29,250, almost 30,000. You'll have to add on to those hours the PPL flight test at 3 hours, which will be 2150 per hour. It's a dual flight, and therefore the cost will come to around about 6,500 or thereabouts, and throw in also the cost of PPL briefings, 20 of them at 250. That will cost you around 5,000 rands. Of course, there's the cost of the aviation medical, a class 1 medical. Some flight schools will arrange this for you, and that allows them to then charge depending on which aviation medical they use. You might not have flexibility in terms of looking for an affordable cost. I mean, some charges might just 2,500, but an aviation medical is much cheaper than that. Actually, I did my last one, a class 1 aviation medical. It cost me about 1,600. So that's the estimate of an aviation medical that you'd get out there. The PPL subjects that you'll have to write, remember this you can write at the CAA offices. If you book for them, and then you can pay and then go right there, or you can write them at your school, because your school is an examination center as well, at least for PPL subjects. Those would cost you around about 2,400 totally. I mean, in total. That is if you pass every subject at first attempt. I mean, if you're going to be repeating your subjects, then of course the cost will eventually go up, but you can estimate that to be around about 2,400 if you're going to pass all those exams at first go. And then there's the English proficiency exam. that you must undergo and be certified to be proficient in the language in which aviation is conducted, which is English, and that may set you back plus minus 850. The same amount would be due for your restricted radio telephony certificate course. A very, very demanding course that you must pass. It's a very demanding course, but quite enjoyable, interesting. It makes you a safer pilot. It helps you, gain a broad understanding of, radio telephony, of communications, and so forth, and airspaces, and reporting points and stuff like that. So that's about 850 or so, depending on who is the examiner that's presenting and examining that particular certificate course. The other thing that you might need to budget for is what is called a PPL kit, which some schools will give to you at a cost of about 6,500. Not this excludes headsets. Headsets are for your own pocket. They will not include these in the PPL kit. This may include your books, your bags, your wheezy wheel, that's the confuser that I talked about in an earlier video, and a training hub for draining fuel from the aircraft, and some other study materials that they may have for you to pursue and finalize your PPL studies. But when it comes to headsets, those things are expensive. You need to dig into your pocket as well and get yourself a good pair of headsets that can last you for years and then to give you good quality in the cockpit. What I've just run down now excludes landing fees. Some schools will charge you landing fees, license issue fees. Some schools will charge you those things. I've excluded them because they're not standard. I mean, these are not standard costs. Some schools will not necessarily be charging you all that. But yeah, what I've just alluded to above comes to a round figure of about 117,400. Now that's before VAT. If you add VAT, that takes you to about 135,000 rands for a PPL. So that's a good estimate of what you're looking at if you're going to be doing your first pilot license. And of course, the breakdown I've given you is a breakdown of an estimated cost of the PPL without a night rating. I have another video that deals specifically with the night rating and how much it would cost. So if you want to know how much the night rating would cost, you do well to check out that video. It should be listed amongst my videos on my channel. I hope that was a useful breakdown of the key costs involved in studying towards your first license, the PPL. Like I said, I did not include every little detail. I included the key things, the major things, the most expensive things that you need to look out for as you plan for your for starting your PPL training. And remember to keep working towards your own goal, your own aspirations, because with every hour the Cockpit Beckons keep adding those hours, an hour of studying, an hour of consultation with others, an hour of just hanging out with fellow aviators, because it's important to create communities for yourselves, communities of like-minded people who share the same passion as you do, people who understand your craziness when you talk about that thing that you're passionate about. So with every hour the Cockpit Beckons, make each hour count. Angelo Dube here saying until next time, cheers.